Hello, everyone. So last night I saw Ridley Scott's Napoleon, and I have a couple thoughts on the movie. Yes, we're getting another disorganized movie thought video. Not done one of these in a while. So yeah, Napoleon. Obviously there has been some discourse, and I say that with air quotes, discourse about the role of historical accuracy in movies. As someone that is very interested in history, pop history, academic history, that sort of thing, I did go into the film looking at it as a film primarily, as a piece of entertainment, rather than a historical record. That being said, the inaccuracies in the movie are a pretty tough pill to swallow for anyone who has even a passing interest in the history. I will be factoring that into my enjoyment of the film, but just know that a lot of my issues that I bring up with the film are independent of that. So, where do I start with this thing? Did I like it? Yes and no. There was a lot that was going for the film, and there's a good film in here, but it needs work. It needs work, and there are some very glaring issues with the film itself that kind of, I want to say, come from like the script. You know, I'm just gonna go through my thoughts. Like all my videos, this is completely unscripted. This is me just listing things off the top of my head. I'm just going to go through... I'm going to bounce between what I thought worked in the film and what didn't work in the film. What did work... Some of the battles depicted in the film are definitely better than others. The start of the film opens with Napoleon being at the... attending the death of Marie Antoinette. In reality, of course, he was never there. There was a unintentional laugh when they described Napoleon as a ambitious young officer, and then you cut to seeing Joaquin Phoenix, and obviously he's the man's almost 50 years old now. You can put a big hat and a wig on him, he's still gonna look like a middle-aged man. Okay, so that was immediately funny. And the first action set piece is the Siege of Toulon. And that's probably the best battle in the film, which is kind of a credit to how good that battle scene is, and also a little bit of an indictment of a bunch of the other battle scenes in the movie. It's quite exciting. They set up a little bit of the preparation that he does before the battle. In the middle of it, they do a very good job of showing the kind of chaos that ensues when you do a nighttime close quarters battle. Whether or not that was accurate to the history, I don't know. I'm not as familiar with the Siege of Toulon as some of his other battles. But that was a good little piece of filmmaking, and there was, it was good to show them seizing the town, seizing the fort, and then opening fire on the British ships that were in blockade. The movie then pivots to him, to kind of the immediate aftermath of the French Revolution, and there are a number of revolutionary figures featured in the movie, although a lot of them really don't get much screen time. And that's kind of an issue with how big and bloated this movie is. I almost feel like this is a movie where if they wanted to tell the scope of the story that I think they intended to, they probably would have needed two movies. One for the rise and one for the fall of Napoleon Bonaparte, which I'm kind of almost surprised they didn't do. Maybe they're not confident this one would do as well as they hoped. A historical biopic in 2023 is a bit of a tough sell commercially. I don't know. But there are a lot of people in this thing, and I think the budget's just a little bit too high to justify a two-parter, given maybe the expected commercial returns. But yeah, there's a lot of revolutionary figures. Some of them are literally mentioned by name in one scene and then never come back again. There are some very notable disappearances of certain characters. Napoleon's brother is featured quite heavily for, I want to say, the first half of the film, and then he just fucking disappears. I don't know if he dies in a deleted scene or whatever, but he's around, and then he just suddenly isn't. There isn't even a passing line about what happened to him. He just stops appearing in the movie, so my assumption is that's a deleted scene. The I want to say the biggest issue with the film is it doesn't know what to focus on. It tries to do too much. And there's almost 3 different movies in here, which any of which you could bring to the forefront with the right editing. The first is, it's a very straightforward historical biopic. It's an account of Napoleon's rise to power and then subsequent downfall, depicting some of the biggest battles of his life. The Siege of Toulon, the Battle of Austerlitz, obviously the Battle of Waterloo features. The actual events depicted in those battles are just kind of complete nonsense. If you know anything about Napoleonic warfare, pretty much every battle devolves into just a big mob of guys running into melee to club each other with their guns. And it's only when you're about 10 feet away from someone do people decide to shoot. That's fine. You want to make it look cinematic. I get it. It's a filmmaking thing. I think they gave especially in the Battle of Austerlitz, there is an account of French artillery firing at Austrians that were fleeing onto a frozen lake. And if you looked... The way the Battle of Austerlitz is depicted in the film, you would think that was the decisive engagement that won the battle. And also that the battle was over quite quickly, which in reality was not the case. Battles lasted a very long time. The depiction of time in the movie is a little strange because of that. It almost seems, and I don't... If I had more confidence in the movie, I would say that this was like an intentional measure, but as the battles progress throughout the movie and as Napoleon's opinion of himself and his ability grows, the battles almost become more dreamlike. So like the Siege of Toulon compared to, say, the Battle of Waterloo or the Battle of Austerlitz, it seems very matter of fact, and I think that's maybe why I like that one more. And so, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, well, maybe is this to reflect that his grip on reality is slipping? But I'll be honest, there's nothing else in the movie that supports that theory. So I have no idea. The Joaquin Phoenix, his depiction of Napoleon, I also have some issues with. It seemed like they wanted to depict him as a maladjusted weirdo, which is a bit of a far cry from the genuinely charismatic Caesar-like figure that the people of France viewed Napoleon as. I'm getting ahead of myself. So they wanted to... Part of the film is it wants to be like a historical biopic. Then the film seems to shift track and it wants to focus on his relationship with Josephine Bonaparte, his wife. Interesting bit of casting. Unfortunately, because of Joaquin Phoenix, in reality, there was by the standards of the time, a fairly substantial age difference between the two. Josephine was 6 years older than Napoleon and already had 2 children from a previous marriage. The actor, whose name I am completely blanking on. So the actor is Vanessa Kirby. She does a decent job. I thought she was pretty good. But because she's acting opposite Phoenix, it gives the vibes that he is a much older person than her. He doesn't really depict any kind of youthfulness or boyishness in his performance. He just seems like an older gentleman who's incredibly horny for a lady that he met at a party, which is maybe not the intended vibe, certainly not the way I would have gone. I would have preferably hired someone who could at least look and act younger than he did. They lean a little bit into his relationship with his mother. However, this is also forgotten about, I want to say, about 2/3 of the way through the movie. She just kind of exits the picture and then never gets brought up again. And yeah, there's another version of this movie where it goes into the romantic life of Napoleon Bonaparte, the kind of psychosexual holdups that he would have had, his insecurities, his issues with conceiving an heir. And you almost maybe like just don't see any battles. It's all about his personal relationship with his family and his loved ones. But again, they don't commit to that. And then the third movie that's in there is, it feels like Ridley Scott just saw the death of Stalin and was like, yeah, I want to make that of Napoleon. There's multiple scenes in this which are funny, but I don't know if they're meant to be funny. which is a bad sign. Because if they are meant to be funny, it's a bizarre tone shift that happens just seemingly at random. There's a couple of scenes in the movie where it seems like Armando Iannucci just walks in and just makes it into a comedy, and there's people stumbling around and swearing and hitting each other, and I was laughing. I got a couple of good belly laughs out of this movie, but it never felt like the movie was in on the joke. And partly I think it's due to the performances and also the color grade. As you can see behind me, the movie's incredibly desaturated. It's quite dark. It's quite high contrast in some respects. And it's got this kind of grim and gritty look about it, which I personally don't think works. The Napoleonic era was a very colorful era. There's a lot of depictions in the movie of the kind of ostentatious fashion that people would have had at the time. And that gets lost. I can't imagine how disappointing it would have been to have been someone working in the costume department on this thing, putting as much effort into the costumes as you do, and then no one can see the colors. Because look at this fucking thing behind me. It's so washed out. Like, the blacks are completely crushed. I don't think it looks good, personally. And it actually made some of the action in some of the battle scenes quite hard to follow. Because the movie was so dark that uniforms started to blend into each other. And in the middle of a big Napoleonic battle scene, when you have a bunch of guys in big hats with rifles trying to beat the shit out of each other, if you can't see what colors they're wearing, it's quite difficult to tell who's who. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Like, there's one particular scene where they show the council members of Revolutionary France being forced to step down. One of them gets arrested while he's eating breakfast, and he starts ranting about, I wish to eat my succulent breakfast, and I immediately thought of that like Australian guy who's like, a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
For what reason? What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal? Oh, that's a nice headlock, sir.
He has that energy, and I have no idea if he was told to act like that, but he almost sounds like that guy, and he acts like that guy. And then as he gets dragged out, his wife starts going "Whoa," and like waving her arms around like she's in a comedy movie. Like, it's like she's in an Adam Sandler movie where someone like threw a pie at her, and then she just keeps doing it. She gets stuck. It's like her brain gets stuck in a loop, and she's like waving her arms going and it doesn't cut. It's like it's like I'm watching Samurai Cop. I don't get it. That was a choice I just do not understand. And there's a couple of instances where the edit just kind of breaks down. I don't know if the editor wasn't paying attention. I don't know if he thought that she looked funny, so they wanted to keep her in. But it completely killed the pace of the scene, and I laughed, but in like an uncomfortable way. Like, you know, if you're like in public and someone does something really embarrassing and you laugh, but you kind of cringe while you laugh? That was me watching that scene in a Napoleon movie. So yeah, Napoleon himself is like a kind of cringy weirdo who seems quite introverted in a lot of scenes. They don't really depict, outside of one scene, there's a lot of focus on his soldiers liking him, but they don't really depict the reaction of the people of France to Napoleon Bonaparte. When he won the Battle of Austerlitz, the nation of France was like whipped into a frenzy. And okay, well, I mean, sometimes when he shows up on a boat, there's like a parade for him, but there isn't really a decent show of like the kind of Napoleon mania that France had at the time. The way they cover his rise to power, they almost make it out that becoming emperor wasn't his idea. Like, someone's just like, hey, Napoleon, you should be emperor. And he's like, oh, that sounds sick. And he just does it. It's almost like he doesn't have much agency in some of the film. And yeah, just a lot of his depictions, he's shown to be quite petulant. He's shown to be quite an egomaniac. But this is never explicitly supported or challenged in any way. I mean, by the end of the movie, he's just blaming pretty much everyone else but him for his failures, which I think he did actually do. But the movie still kind of treats him with this kind of reverence, which almost seems to validate that opinion of him. Like, oh, well, maybe if his guys weren't as useless as him, or... Yeah, it's just, there's other things. Like, the most boring battle in the movie is the Battle of Waterloo. And the way that the battle is shot and edited, it seems like they're up against it and they're losing to the British, like, immediately. In reality, the French were doing quite well until the Prussians showed up. The British were struggling a bit. And then the Prussian, the German reinforcements show up, and that helps turn the tide of the battle. The way it's depicted in the movie, the French cavalry rush the British, they don't do anything, then the infantry start to move in. The Duke of Wellington is just stood there and he goes, "Oh, thank God, the Germans are here." Despite the fact that he looked like he was winning. The battles are not well shot, and they don't convey what's happening in them particularly well. Every single battle, aside from the first one, is just a bunch of guys run into each other until one side goes retreat, and then the battle's like immediately over. There's also a very strange depiction of a lot of the European order, especially the British. They make special emphasis on Napoleon's bad manners, and it gets to the point where it's almost comical. And Napoleon can't interact with anyone British without them saying, "Oh, well, you're so ill-mannered. Oh, we'll teach him some manners." Oh, it's like... it was almost comedy at that point. They did it so often. And it's like, there's ways that you could depict that Napoleon was an outsider among European nobility and royalty without people specifically using the word manners constantly. It's like the movie thinks you're stupid. Which is never a good sign. And there's other parts of the movie that feel like they're edited to be comedy. Pretty much any time that Napoleon wants to have sex, it's edited as a comedy. He has some very petulant outbursts. One of the bigger laughs in the movie theater is him throwing a tantrum in front of a British diplomat saying, "You think you people are so good because you have boats." And again, if that was meant to be funny, I don't know if it landed in the right way. People laughed, but nah, yeah. Yeah, tonally, this movie is just kind of a mess. It doesn't look particularly good. I mean, it looks slick, it looks expensive, but I think the grade actively ruined a lot of what the movie set out to do. Like, the grade just looks bad, in my opinion. Audio's fine, there's no real standouts in the film score. It was quite forgettable in my opinion. There's a lot of characters who show up and then just vanish. Josephine's children aren't in 90% of the movie. Napoleon has a fucking son and he gets remarried and they just disappear. The movie tried to do too much, and at 2.5 hours I was beginning to feel it by the end anyway. Yeah, next, if you want to make a historical epic, I don't know, make 2 movies. Would I recommend you go see it? No, don't pay full cinema ticket price. It's not worth it in my opinion. If it comes out, it looks like this is an Apple original. They're doing what a lot of streaming services are doing, where they'll make a movie. Netflix does this as well. They'll make a movie and they'll give it a theatrical release because they want to get it awarded. They wanted to get it into awards nominations, and you need like a theatrical release for that. There are some other historical figures that are featured in that aren't French that are featured in the movie, but they really don't get much screen time. Tsar Alexander of Russia is one. Arthur Wellesley from the British Empire is another. Alexander gets a little bit of screen time, but he was a very interesting figure in reality, and they don't really show the more interesting parts of his personality. Arthur Wellesley just seems like a raging snob who doesn't really care about what's happening in front of him, which is fine. Whether or not that's accurate, probably. I mean, he's a British officer, command officer. That was certainly happening at the time, but it's not very interesting to watch. It's, I don't know. It tried to do too much. The movie couldn't make up what kind of movie it wanted to be. I feel a more focused script, a bit more color. some recast. There's a lot of different components here that all combined to me not really loving this one. If you're interested in the period of history, you'll probably get annoyed because too much will be wrong. If you want to watch battle scenes, you'll get bored by all of the drama. If you like Joaquin Phoenix, watch You Were Never Really Here instead. That's a much better movie. Yeah, I enjoyed Barbie more. I did make a video on that one, but I did see Barbie and I did enjoy it quite a bit. A lot of the stuff that I criticized Oppenheimer for, I prefer Oppenheimer. Yeah, no, this isn't getting on any of my shortlists for this year. Just maybe give this one a miss, unless you really want to see it. But yeah, thank you. I know I've not been uploading much long-term content lately. I've just been focusing on the streaming, you know, trying out YouTube Shorts. Some of those seem to do pretty well. Couldn't tell you which ones or why. I am working on another gaming industry video. But yeah, thank you for joining me. That's my verdict. If I had to give this a numerical score, 6 out of 10? 5 out of 10? It's average. I like some stuff, I didn't like other stuff. Needs more time in the oven. Ridley Scott needs to stop picking fights of historians. It's really embarrassing, and it makes him look really childish. Anyway, thanks. I'll see you on the next one.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest. Have a look at the headlock here. See that chap over there? Get your hand off my penis! This is the bloke who got me on the penis before.